The Mafia boss laughed when the harbor pilot warned him his brother was lying. "You steer ships," Dante Vescari said coldly. "You don't tell my family who to trust." Everyone at the dock heard it. Everyone watched Mara Reyes, a curvy woman in a weather-beaten pilot jacket, lose the job her father had taught her to love. Hours later, a Vescari container vanished from a sealed pier. Security footage showed Mara near the controls. GPS records placed her boat on the wrong side of the harbor, and Luca Vescari had a flawless alibi. He claimed he had never left the family estate. But Mara's handwritten logbook held a detail the digital system could not erase: a water level, a drift angle, and the path of an unmarked tugboat. The question was not whether Luca had lied. It was why he wanted everyone to believe Mara was guilty before she could tell Dante what was hidden inside that missing container. At 5:40 in the morning, Belladonna Harbor belonged to fog, diesel smoke, and people who knew better than to look nervous. Mara Reyes stood inside the wheelhouse of the Marisol, one hand wrapped around the rail, the other hovering near the radio. Beyond the glass, the black water moved like oil beneath the ship's bow. To her left, cranes rose out of the mist. To her right, the old breakwater waited behind a line of rocks sharp enough to gut a hull. 2 degrees starboard, she said. The captain obeyed without question. That was the thing about Mara. Men twice her size and 3 times as loud listened when she spoke on the water. They had learned that her calm voice did not mean uncertainty. It meant she had already measured the current, the wind, the cargo weight, the depth under the keel, and the fact that something was wrong. The channel marker ahead was blinking green. It should have been red. Mara narrowed her eyes. "Slow her down." The captain turned from the controls. "We're already behind schedule. Slow her down." A pause. Then the engines lowered their growl. Mara reached for the binoculars. The marker floated 30 yards east of where it belonged. That was no accident. The mooring chain had either snapped or someone had moved it. Behind them, the Marisol carried sealed containers under the protection of the Vescari family. That alone made the schedule dangerous. Dante Vescari did not tolerate delays. His ships arrived on time. His people kept their mouths shut, and nobody questioned the route once his office approved it. But the tide was turning early. Mara watched foam curl along the outer rocks. If the captain followed the marked channel, the ship would be pulled sideways before the next bend. One bad correction, 1 second of panic, and millions of dollars in cargo would end up on the harbor floor. "Port 10 degrees, she ordered. "Now." The captain's face tightened. "That takes us outside the approved lane. It keeps us off the rocks." The ship began to turn. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the current hit. The Marisol shuddered hard enough to rattle the windows. The boat swung toward the rocks exactly where Mara had predicted. The captain cursed and fought the wheel. But Mara was already calling distances, angles, and engine adjustments. "Port 5. Hold it. Hold it." The hull passed the first line of rocks with less than 10 feet to spare. Only when the open water widened ahead did the captain let out a broken breath. Mara did not celebrate. Through the thinning fog, she saw a tugboat drifting near an unused service dock. No name, no port lights, no registration number where it should have been. And behind it, half hidden beneath a black tarp, something long and rectangular was being pulled toward the private Vescari channel. Mara opened her weathered logbook. 5:47 a.m. wrong tide. Moved marker, unmarked tugboat entering restricted water. Then she wrote down the final detail. A number painted faintly on the tugboat's stern, V19. By noon, the fog had burned away. Pier 9 stood exposed beneath a hard white sky, crowded with dock workers, security men, captains, and enough Vescari employees to make Mara feel as if the entire harbor had been ordered to watch her fall. The Marisol sat safely at berth. No rocks had touched her hull, no containers had gone overboard, no one had died. But Dante Vescari did not look at the ship when he stepped onto the pier. He looked at Mara. He wore a black suit without a tie, as if even formal clothes were beneath him. Tall, still, and impossible to read, Dante had the kind of silence that made other people rush to fill it. His dark eyes moved from Mara's pilot jacket to the mud on her boots, then toward Luca Vescari. His younger brother stood beside him with a tablet in hand. "The Marisol was delayed 41 minutes, Luca said. His voice was soft, polished, almost apologetic. "The route deviation happened under Ms. Reyes's authority." Mara crossed her arms. The channel marker was moved. Luca tapped the tablet. "Port navigation data says otherwise." A screen mounted on the loading office wall came to life. A digital chart showed the Marisol turning sharply out of the approved lane. A red line marked Mara's deviation. A second image showed the harbor marker glowing exactly where it was supposed to be. Mara stared at it. The timing was wrong, not obviously wrong. Not to anyone who had never guided a ship through Belladonna's shifting currents. but the display showed the tide moving west at 5:47. That morning it had been pulling east. Someone had changed the data. The marker was east of its position, Mara said. I saw it. Dante's expression did not move, and you chose to ignore the approved lane. I chose not to put your ship into a rock wall. A few workers exchanged looks. Captain Bell, standing near the gangway, lowered his eyes. Luca sighed. Dante, perhaps she panicked. Mara turned on him. Your tugboat was in the private channel. For the first time, Luca's smile tightened. What tugboat? Unmarked. No registration lights. Stern number V19. Silence rippled through the pier. Then Dante gave a short, humorless laugh. You're accusing my family of running ghost vessels now? I'm telling you what I saw. No, Dante said. You're trying to excuse a mistake. He stepped closer. Mara held his stare, though her pulse had started to pound in her throat. You are paid to guide ships, he said, his voice carrying across the pier. Not invent trouble because you want to feel important. Mara's jaw tightened. Dante looked toward the workers. A harbor pilot who cannot follow a channel is a liability, and a liability this large does not get a second chance with my cargo. The words landed exactly as he intended. Sharp, public, cruel. Mara felt heat rise into her face, but she refused to look down. Dante took the pilot badge from the front of her jacket. He held it between two fingers. Effective immediately, you are suspended from every Vescari berth. Then he dropped the badge into Luca's waiting hand. Mara watched Luca close his fingers around it, and she understood something worse than humiliation. The man who had altered the harbor data was standing close enough to Dante to whisper directly into his ear. Mara did not go home. At 6 that evening, she returned to the harbor through the old maintenance gate near Pier 3, where the cameras had been broken for so long that nobody bothered pretending they worked. She wore a gray hoodie over her pilot jacket and kept her hair tucked beneath a knit cap. The tide was rising. That mattered. At high water, a small tugboat could slip through the abandoned service channel behind the customs warehouse. At low water, the mudflat would trap it for hours. Mara crouched behind a stack of rusted cable drums and watched the private Vescari channel through binoculars. At 6:17, the unmarked tugboat appeared. V19. It moved without navigation lights, its engine kept low. A black tarp covered the load behind it, but Mara recognized the steel corners of a shipping container. The markings had been painted over, though fresh scratches showed where the original Vescari seal had been removed. Her stomach tightened. The container was being moved off-book. A man stood on the tug's rear deck, speaking into a radio. Mara could not see his face clearly, but she saw the expensive watch catch the harbor lights. Silver band, dark blue dial. Luca Vescari wore that watch. Mara reached for her phone, then stopped. The screen flickered once. A warning flashed across it. Lolation sharing active. She had disabled that setting months ago. Someone was tracking her. She shut the phone off, removed the battery case, and slid it beneath a loose plank in the dock. Then she pulled out an old marine radio from her bag. The tug was heading toward open water. If it reached the outer channel, it would disappear before anyone could legally stop it. Mara had no badge, no authority, and no proof strong enough to call the harbor police without exposing herself. But she had one thing Luca's men did not expect. The Adriana, a Vescari cargo barge, was approaching the inner bend under automatic harbor guidance. Its scheduled route would cut directly across the tug's escape line. Mara listened to the radio frequency. Adriana, this is Belladonna traffic control, she said, deepening her voice just enough. Navigation hazard reported near marker 6. Divert east channel immediately. The captain hesitated. East channel is restricted, hazard confirmed. Divert now. The barge turned. The tugboat had to veer sharply to avoid it. Its deck rocked. The tarp snapped loose in the wind. For 1 second, Mara saw inside the container. Not guns, not cash. Black server racks, wired with cooling units and backup batteries. A floating data vault. Then a shout came from the tug. Mara ran. She reached her old pilot office 3 minutes later. Breath burning in her chest, the door was already open. Inside, papers covered the floor. Her desk drawers had been ripped apart. The digital harbor charts were gone. So was the copy she had made of her morning log, but the original was still safe. Before leaving home, Mara had torn out the page marked 5:47 a.m. and hidden it inside the brass compass case her father had carried for 30 years. She opened the case with shaking fingers. The page was there. Outside, an engine started. Mara looked through the broken window and saw 2 black SUVs turning toward her office. They had not found the evidence, but they knew exactly where to look next. Mara made it as far as the back door. A hand caught her elbow before she reached the alley. She twisted hard, driving her heel down onto a boot. The man cursed, but another one stepped out of the darkness beside the office wall. Neither wore a Vescari suit. They wore dockworker jackets and carried themselves like men who expected doors to open for them. "Mr. Vescari wants a word," the first man said. "I'm sure he does." Mara looked past them. The black SUVs blocked both ends of the narrow service road. The harbor lights reflected off wet pavement. No pedestrians, no witnesses. She could run, she could fight. Neither would get her past 6 men in 2 vehicles. So she slipped the brass compass case deeper into the inner pocket of her jacket and said, "Then he can use one." They took her to Warehouse 12. It was not a dungeon. That would have been easier to understand. It was a polished private warehouse used for high-value cargo, with bright overhead lights, clean concrete floors, and glass offices above the loading bays. Dante stood near a steel table. Luca leaned against a crate beside him, still wearing the same silver watch. On the table sat a tablet, a stack of printed bank records, and Mara's old pilot badge. Dante did not ask if she was hurt. "Where is the container?" he said. Mara stared at him. "You know about the container?" "I know a Vescari data vault was diverted from its scheduled transfer," Dante said. "I know you impersonated traffic control. I know you were caught near the service channel. And I know someone wired $50,000 into an account under your name 3 days ago." Luca turned the tablet toward her. There it was. Her name, her account number, a deposit she had never seen. Mara felt the trap close around her. "That is not my money." "Then explain it." "I can explain the tide. I can explain the route. I can explain why your brother's tugboat was in restricted water." Her eyes locked on Luca. "But I cannot explain evidence someone built before I knew I was being hunted." Luca looked almost disappointed. "Dante, she is frightened. People say strange things when they are frightened." Mara took a step toward him. "You changed the navigation data." One of Dante's men moved between them. Dante's face hardened. "Enough." The word cracked across the warehouse. For a moment, Mara saw no anger in him, only certainty. That was worse. Anger could be challenged. Certainty had already decided she was guilty. "You had access," Dante said. "You diverted my barge. You were in the channel when the vault disappeared. The money is in your account." The money was planted. And the ghost tugboat? Ask Luca where he was at 5:47 this morning. Luca's gaze shifted for half a second toward Dante. Mara caught it. Dante did not. "My brother was at the estate," he said. "Was he?" Dante stepped closer until there was barely a foot between them. His voice dropped. "You are good at your job, Mara, better than most. That is why I gave you more access than a harbor pilot usually gets. Do not make me regret that." The words cut deeper than the insult at Pier 9, because some part of her had respected him. He had been demanding, arrogant, impossible, but until that morning, he had trusted her hands on the water. Now he saw only the lie someone had placed in front of him. Dante picked up her pilot badge. "Your access to every Vescari dock is revoked. Your contracts are terminated. If you contact any captain, customs officer, or member of my family about this, I will treat it as interference with an active internal investigation." "You don't have an investigation," Mara said quietly. "You have your brother feeding you a script." Luca smiled. Dante gave the order with his back half turned. "Put her outside the east gate." Mara did not fight the guards, not because she was afraid, because she had just seen something in Luca's eyes when Dante mentioned the estate. Relief. Luca believed Dante had ended this for him, and people only looked that relieved when the person they feared had been silenced. Outside the warehouse, Mara found her phone resting on the curb where she had hidden it. The battery had been replaced. The screen lit up by itself. A single photograph filled the display. Her younger brother Tomas, walking home from his night class. Below it was one message: "Stop following the tide." Mara did not go to Tomas's apartment. That was the first thing fear wanted her to do. Run straight to him, bang on his door, demand to know if he was safe. It was also exactly what Luca expected. Instead, she walked 3 blocks through the industrial district, cut behind a closed fish market, and entered a repair yard through a side gate hanging loose on one hinge. The yard belonged to Eli Navarro, an old friend of her father's and the only mechanic in Belladonna who still fixed manual pilot systems. Eli was asleep in the cramped office when Mara knocked twice, paused, then knocked once more. He opened the door with a wrench in his hand. "You look terrible," he said. "So does your security. It keeps out honest people." Mara stepped inside and locked the door behind her. For the next hour, she did not touch her phone. She used Eli's old paper charts, his tide tables, and the page from her father's logbook. The details she had written at 5:47 were not random. Her father had taught her to record the water level against fixed harbor structures whenever something looked wrong. Mara lined the numbers up with the Vescari digital route displayed earlier that day. Then she found it. The GPS route Luca had used against her showed the Marisol passing marker 6 at 5:47. But at that exact water level, the marker's base would have been exposed nearly 2 feet above the surface. No ship could have passed it on the recorded line. The footage had been edited, the route had been invented. Mara's hands went still over the chart. The unmarked tugboat had not been transporting a random container. It had crossed the service channel at the only time the harbor radar calibration shifted from night mode to day mode. Someone with access to the Vescari schedule had chosen the window carefully. Luca had not just moved a container. He had planned the entire lie around the tide. Across town, Dante Vescari sat alone in his office above Pier 9. The warehouse had emptied, but Mara's last words had not. Ask Luca where he was at 5:47 this morning. Dante opened the bank records again. $50,000, clean deposit. Too clean. Mara Reyes had once refused a paid offer from a rival shipping company because they wanted her to ignore an oil leak outside the harbor. Dante remembered the incident because she had walked into his office afterward and told him his contractor was endangering fishermen. She had been angry. She had been right. A woman who had risked her job over an oil leak did not suddenly sell herself for $50,000 while stealing a data vault worth millions. That was the first contradiction. The second arrived when Dante called Captain Bell. Could the Marisol have followed the route shown in the GPS record? Dante asked. Bell was quiet for too long. No, he finally said. Not at that tide. Dante's grip tightened around the phone. The third came 10 minutes later. He told Luca only one thing. The harbor police found the container. It was a lie. Luca went pale. Where? He asked too quickly. Did they check the East Channel? Dante said nothing. His brother understood the silence. For the first time that day, the polished calm fell away from Luca's face. He ended the call without another word. Dante looked through his office window toward the dark harbor. Shame came slowly, then all at once. He had humiliated Mara in public. He had believed forged evidence because it fit the answer his anger wanted, and now she was alone, hunted, and afraid for her brother. Dante found the repair yard through an old emergency contact record in Mara's personnel file. He went without an escort. When Mara opened the office door, she did not look relieved to see him. She looked ready to slam it shut. Don't, Dante said. Her hand remained on the door. I know the route was impossible, he continued, and I know Luca lied. Mara's eyes were cold. That is not the same as knowing I'm innocent. No, Dante said, it isn't. For once, he did not try to command the next moment. I was wrong, he said. Tell me what you need to prove it. Mara stared at Dante for a long moment. Rain tapped against the repair yard windows. Behind her, Eli had disappeared into the workshop, wisely leaving them alone with the things neither of them could take back. You want to know what I need, Mara said at last. I need Tomas safe before we do anything else. Dante nodded once. Where is he? I don't know. And I'm not calling him from any phone you own. You shouldn't. The agreement surprised her. Dante took his own phone from his pocket, powered it off, removed the battery case, and set it on the desk between them. Ellie has a landline, he asked. Mara pointed toward the workshop. 10 minutes later, Dante's head of security arrived alone in an unmarked delivery van. His name was Raphael Cole, and he did not speak until Mara had given him Tomas's class schedule, bus route, and the photograph Luca's men had sent. We will not approach him in public, Raphael said. We'll watch the route, confirm he is safe, then move him only if we see a threat. Mara studied him. And he won't be taken to a Vescari house. No, Dante said. Where he goes will be your decision. It was a small thing. But after the warehouse, small things mattered. An hour later, Raphael called from a borrowed payphone. Tomas had never reached his bus stop. 2 men had followed him from campus, but Raphael's team intercepted them before they made contact. Tomas was safe at Eli's sister's home across the bay, somewhere Luca would not think to search. Mara closed her eyes. The breath she released trembled. Dante did not reach for her. He did not offer comfort he had not earned. He stood 3 feet away and waited until she opened her eyes again. Then Mara pulled the brass compass case from her jacket. My father used to say, the harbor remembers every lie, she said. You just have to know where it leaves the mark. She spread the torn log page beside the tide chart. The container is not valuable because of what it is. It's valuable because of what it contains. Those server racks store route records, bribe payments, names of customs inspectors, and contracts Luca can use to sell your shipping lanes. Dante looked at the figures. To whom? Not one buyer. A coalition. If Luca delivers the data at tomorrow night's Harbor Alliance signing, he controls who enters Belladonna for years. And if the deal closes, your family becomes a front for people you can't control. Dante's expression darkened. Mara tapped the route she had reconstructed. Luca cannot move the real container now. The harbor police will be watching every channel after your false report, so he will try to recover it another way, by finding you. No, Mara met his eyes. By finding what he thinks I know. For the first time, Dante understood. The logbook, not just the page. He thinks I wrote down where the container went. She had not. The barge diversion had been an instinctive act, not a planned recovery. But Luca did not know that. Mara slid a blank page from Eli's desk and began writing in the same compact hand she used for harbor logs. 1:20 a.m. East Channel. Passenger ferry Belle Star. Temporary transfer point. Dante watched her. You're making him believe the server racks are on a ferry. I'm making him believe I'm desperate enough to move them before the signing. That ferry carries civilians, which is why he won't attack it while it's full. He'll wait for the maintenance dock after midnight. Dante looked toward the black water beyond the yard. And when he comes, Mara folded the page into the brass compass case. Then we make sure the people he sends believe they stole exactly what Luca asked for. Dante's gaze moved to her face. This is dangerous. So was putting a ship through a false channel this morning. I won't order you into it. You don't get to order me anywhere. A faint, painful understanding crossed his face. No, he said quietly. I don't. Mara stood and tucked the false logbook page into her pocket. Good, she said. Then help me set the tide. The following night, Belladonna Harbor glittered as if it had never known corruption. The alliance signing was held inside the Port Authority's glass-walled reception hall. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the water shone black beneath rows of security lights. Inside, council members, shipping executives, union representatives, lawyers, and reporters filled the room. Luca Vescari stood at the center table in a midnight blue suit. He looked composed, untouched. Dante stood beside him, expression closed, while the chairman of the authority introduced the new harbor partnership. Luca had spent the morning telling everyone that Mara Reyes had been dismissed for theft and that Vescari operations were fully secure. A clean story, a useful story. Then the main doors opened. Conversation died in waves. Mara walked in wearing her pilot uniform. Her jacket was clean. Her badge had been restored that afternoon. Not as a favor from Dante, but because the Harbor Pilots Association had reviewed her suspension and found no legal grounds to keep it in place. In one hand, she carried the brass compass case. In the other, nothing. She did not need a weapon. Luca's face went white for half a second before he recovered. Dante had already placed the truth where it belonged, in the hands of people who could preserve it. The Port Authority had issued an emergency order protecting the radar archive. A federal maritime investigator stood near the back wall with 2 officers. Raphael and Eli waited outside by the river maintenance dock. Luca smiled at Mara as if the room belonged to him. Ms. Reyes, he said, this is an unfortunate place to make a scene. Mara stopped beside the signing table. No, she said, this is the only place it can be finished. Luca turned toward the gathered guests. She is under investigation for, not anymore, Dante said. The words landed heavier than a shout. Luca looked at his brother. Dante did not look away. The account deposit was traced to a shell company controlled by one of your logistics officers, he continued. The GPS record was altered before it was submitted, and the Marisol could not have traveled the route you used to accuse Mara. Murmurs rose through the room. Luca's smile thinned. You are trusting her over your own blood. I am trusting evidence, Dante said. Mara placed the compass case on the table and opened it. Inside lay the original page from her father's logbook. She slid it across to the maritime investigator. 5:47 in the morning, she said. The water level, the current direction, marker 6 displaced east. An unmarked tug entered the restricted channel. Luca gave a small laugh. A handwritten note proves nothing. It proves the official route is false, Mara said. But that isn't all. The investigator connected a tablet to the room's display. The harbor radar record appeared on every screen, certified data, preserved directly from the Port Authority server before anyone in the Vescari family could alter it. At 5:47 a.m., a tugboat identified by its engine signature crossed the restricted channel. V-19, the investigator enlarged the tracking record. The tug had taken a route impossible to see from public water, then traveled toward the Vescari estate's private shoreline. Luca's alibi began to collapse in silence. You said you never left the estate, Mara told him, but the tug's engine telemetry logged your personal security code when the boat started, and you crossed the channel during a tide only a harbor pilot would know how to use. Luca's jaw tightened, then his phone vibrated. He glanced down. A message appeared on the screen. Package secured. East Maintenance Dock. Need extraction. The false container had done its job. Luca looked toward the windows without meaning to. That was enough. Dante nodded once to the investigator. At the East Maintenance Dock, officers moved in on Luca's men as they lifted a decoy server case from the Belle Star's service hold. Their radio traffic, recorded under warrant, played through the Port Authority system. Mr. Vescari said no witnesses. Luca's face lost all color. The room was no longer watching Mara. It was watching him. He reached for the unsigned agreement, perhaps to tear it apart, perhaps to run. Dante stepped between him and the door. "You used my name to bury her," Dante said quietly. "You used this harbor to sell everyone in it." Luca's eyes flashed with hate. "You were always too proud to see what was beside you." "No," Dante replied. "I was too proud to listen." The officers took Luca's arms. As they led him away, he looked back at Mara. But she was no longer the woman standing alone on Pier 9. She stood in the center of the harbor's truth, holding the one record his lies could never wash away. 3 weeks later, the harbor was quieter. Not peaceful. Belladonna would never be that. But the men who had followed Tomas were in custody. The false account had been cleared from Mara's name. Luca Vescari faced charges that grew longer every time investigators opened another file from the recovered server racks. The alliance signing had been canceled. The Port Authority had opened an independent review into every private route connected to the Vescari family. And on a bright Monday morning, workers gathered again at Pier 9. Mara stood near the rail in her pilot uniform, watching the first cargo ship of the day approach the channel. The same water, the same wind, the same rocks waiting beneath the surface for anyone foolish enough to trust appearances. Behind her, someone tapped a microphone. Dante Vescari stood before the crowd. This time he had no tablet in his hand, no guards at his shoulders, no brother beside him to tell him what to believe. He looked directly at Mara. 3 weeks ago, he said, I accused Mara Reyes of betrayal without giving her the respect of a fair hearing. I humiliated her in front of the people who trusted her skill. I used my power to make her smaller because I was too proud to admit I did not know the whole truth. The doc stayed silent. I was wrong. He did not rush the words. He did not decorate them. I have restored every contract she lost. The Vescari shipping group has compensated her for the income taken during her suspension. And beginning today, the Belladonna Pilot Safety Fund will be established in the name of Gabriel Reyes. Mara's breath caught. Her father's name appeared on the screen behind him. The fund would finance safety equipment, independent reporting systems, and legal support for harbor workers who saw something wrong and feared speaking up. Dante lowered the microphone. Then he walked toward her, stopping at a respectful distance. The board wants you to lead the program, he said. Not as my employee, as an independent director with full authority over the fund. Mara looked at the papers Raphael carried behind him. The terms were clean. No hidden control. No Vescari veto. No obligation to Dante. You already had these reviewed, she said. By your lawyer, Dante replied. She changed several clauses. A small smile touched Mara's mouth despite herself. Good, she turned back to the water. The incoming ship had reached the outer marker. The captain waited for her signal. For years, Mara had worked under men who thought power meant being the loudest voice in the room. But the harbor had taught her something else. Real strength listened to the current before it spoke. She accepted the folder from Raphael. I'll lead the fund, she said. Dante nodded. That is more than I deserve. It has nothing to do with what you deserve. I know. Mara stepped toward the pilot launch. Then she paused. My shift ends at 7. Dante looked at her. If you still want to apologize, she said, you can buy me dinner. In a place where nobody knows your name. For the first time since Pier 9, Dante smiled without power behind it. I would like that. Mara climbed into the launch. The engine started. The water opened ahead of her, and this time the harbor carried her name with respect.